Good day, everyone. My name is Chantal Noel Victoria F. Chua, and I am the leader of Group 3. We will be discussing the charging for engineering services. I have two members as well that will be discussing their reports. We have Miss Christine Cyril Delere and Miss Kathleen Danielle Dupra. The first part will be discussed by Miss Kathleen Dupra, so I hope you enjoy our lecture.
There are several methods by which calculation of engineering consultant services cost can be carried out in construction. It is possible to employ various charging approaches at different phases of consultant services. The application of each method or combination of methods is dependent on nature, scope, and complexity of the required engineering services. In this report, these charging consulting services are discussed. First is salary cost times multiplier plus direct salary expenses. Second, hourly billing rate plus reimbursable. Third, per dime. Fourth, cost plus fixed fee. Fifth, fixed price. And lastly, percentage of construction cost. Salary cost times multiplier plus direct non-salary expense. Compensation on the basis of the salary cost times an agreed multiplier is a frequently used method of determining charges of engineering service. With this method, charges of engineering services are based mainly on direct salaries. It is therefore advisable that the civil engineer reach an agreement with the client on salary ranges for each classification of services applicable, as well as on the time period over they can guaranteed. This may help to avoid future surprises, misunderstanding, and disputes. There are specific project conditions for which multiplier method for charging consultant services is suitable. For example, if the scope of project is not outlined properly, the extent of the project is defined adequately or substantial complex project. The following factors are pertinent to salary cost times multiplier. Salary cost is defined as the direct salaries plus employment benefits. For examples are sick leave, vacation, holiday, and incentives pay. Multiplier is applied to salary cost is a factor that compensates the civil engineer to overhead plus reasonable margin to contingency, interest, or invested capital readiness to serve and profit. Direct non-salary expense usually incurred in engineering engagement may include the following: living, living and traveling expenses, identifiable communication expenses, expenses for service and equipment direct compatible to the project, identifiable drafting supplies, stenographic supplies, and production work, expenses for usual insurance, and specialized health and safety programs. The civil engineer's overhead, which comprises a major portion of the compensation generated by the multiplier on salary costs. It includes the following direct costs: A. Provision for office expenses. B. Tax and insurance other than those included as salary costs. C. Library and periodical expenses. D. Executive, administrative, accounting, legal, scenographic, and clerical salaries and expenses, other than salaries included in salary costs and expenses. Letter E. Business development expenses. F. Provision for loss of productive time. And lastly, cost of acquiring and maintaining computer development of softwares and training staff when not billed as direct cost. Accounting records. The civil engineer who performs services under the salary cost times multiplier agreement or the other based cost agreement must provide the accounting necessary to segregate and record the appropriate expenditures. Adequately detailed early time record must be maintained for principal, engineers, and other employees who devoted time to the project. Applicable payroll records together with receipt or other document to substantiate chargeable expenditures must be available for inspection or audit by the client if required by the contract. Hourly billing rate plus reimbursable. Hourly billing rate plus reimbursable expenses is similar to multiplier approach, where hourly billing rate includes all direct personal expense, overhead, and profits. Direct non-salary expense are separated items for reimbursement, usually with service charge, are usually on project where the scope of service is not well defined or to simply accounting and record keeping. The term reimbursement is compensation received by an individual for out-of-pocket costs incurred maybe by the client employee or other party. Example would be reimbursement of company expenses, insurance costs, and overpaid taxes.
Good day, everyone. My name is Christine Cyril Delere, and I will be discussing per diem, cost plus fixed fee, and fixed price. Per diem. This phrase refers to an 8-hour day. According to Section 2 of the PIE's manual, direct personal services such as consultations, research, reports, investigations, design services, construction services, engineering support are usually transacted on a per diem method. This method is used by specialists, legal advice, or consultation, and any short-term transaction, including personal services. Per diem is a daily allowance provided to the employees to compensate for any expenses, such as travel, food, and incidental. It is used while on a business trip. Per diem rates can differ based on the services, difficulty, significance, liability, professional perspective, and skill. For any services and consultation made with a professional civil engineer, a per diem charge is applied, incurred for each day represented. If the presence and participation of the civil engineer exceed from a regular 8-hour day, which is based on the contract or agreement between the client, the rate of the per diem will increase correspondingly. Per diem rates may differ from one place to another depending on its employee service, period, and location. Rates depending on its location, considering large cities, may increase due to the higher cost of living. Depending on the service period, the employer or the client must consider if the professionals have worked longer than the standard 8-hour day. These are the advantages of per diem. Reimbursement of work-related expenses. Employees should not have to pay out of pocket for reasonable expenses incurred while traveling on official business. Promoting professional development. People are most likely to attend optional trainings or meetings at which they will learn new professional skills if they are reimbursed for the expenses required to attend these meetings. Providing incentives. In some countries, employees are poorly paid. Low salaries translate into low levels of motivation to participate wholeheartedly in efforts to achieve organizational goals. On the other hand, the negative impact of per diem is delaying of operations. As the senior officials attend meetings to gain per diem, tasks such as approving budget, signing contract, and supervising personnel are delayed or neglected. Favoring other workers. Given a choice, many people will apply for assignments for which there are per diems involved, and especially those tasks with the highest per diems. Cost plus fixed fee. A cost plus fixed fee contract is known as CPFF. is the contract cost reimbursed for all consultation services and resource used in construction or project, such as salary, overhead, and direct costs, non-salary expense, and fixed fee. CPFF also helps the client or the company to collect a profit on the project and promote economic productivity from each different field of civil engineering. On the other hand, in a standard cost plus fixed fee contract, the additional cost or fixed or fee is not included in the calculations as the percentage value of the total cost, which the fee may differ based on the actual cost. A cost plus fixed fee contract is a detailed contract type that ensures the contractor receives the following: regular expense related to the scope of the job and an additional compensation or bonus upon completing the project. Transactions for the cost-based plan should fit for the compensations of all costs to be acquired directly or indirectly concerning the project, considering but not restricted to the plan when the contract is settled. The record and inventory or reimbursement items should be clear, detailed, and thorough as possible. Using CPFF contract can help and support contractors to accept a specific job that is difficult and risky for them. This method can ensure to be transferred to more suitable line of work. Fixed fee. A fixed price is the value of a specific product or a service that cannot change after it is settled. The price of the goods and services is kept to be constant regarding of the production cost. This method is used when the client has been presented by the project's nature, specification, and scope. The fixed price expense can be determined as the summation of the estimated costs of wages, salaries, non-salary expenses, overhead, maintenance, and profit. A fixed price contract should include precise and detailed information of the schedule during the construction of the project and the negation of modification compensation. The client or the company shall provide partial payment to the civil engineer at a given period stated in the contract for the performance of the services.
So, good day everyone. I'm Chantal Noel Victoria F. Chua, and today I will be discussing the percentage of construction cost in charging an engineering project. So, what is the percentage of construction cost? It is also called as the completion method, which is done by calculating the ongoing recognition of revenue and expenses related to longer-term projects based on the proportion of work completed. It can also be said that this method can be used to determine the compensation of the engineer for the services where the principal responsibility is the detailed design or construction supervision of the facilities to be constructed. So, the construction cost is defined as the estimated total cost of constructing the facility to be covered by the proposed detailed design, or the construction supervision services, excluding the fees and other costs such as services, the cost of land and right-of-way, and as well as the legal and administrative expenses. Over the years, engineering experience has established some appropriate correlations between engineering costs and construction costs for certain types of engineering design, where design procedure and materials of construction are standardized. These correlations have resulted in various curves and schedules which may have been widely used by different engineering sites or different references for a lot of engineering firms that handles construction designing and as well as supervision of the construction site. So the validity of the percentage of construction cost method rests upon the assumption that the detailed design and construction supervision costs vary in proportion to the cost of the construction. So there are actually four variations of how a how the percentage of the construction cost is divided upon. So next we have the percentage of construction cost, and it's four variations. So these percentage fee shall consider the type, complexity, location, and magnitude of the construction cost of the project. It is also to make sure that it shall not exceed the following percentages of estimated construction costs. So first we have our feasibility studies. So this is 3% of construction costs. It is done in determining whether a potential site will work for a certain project. It is one of the primary reasons owners and developers choose to conduct feasibility studies before buying a land or building in an existing site. This type of project or study requires a lot of observation and uh, on-site projects. It is to make sure that the land is suitable for the certain project that the owners or the clients want. And this is not a free service. Of course, it has to be paid at least 3% of the entire construction cost. Next, we have our detailed engineering design, which will be it will have a 6% percentage cost. So this done by designing a detailed phase where the design is refined and the plans, specifications, and estimates are created. This phase is where the full cost of the project is identified. So since we already said that it's a detailed engineering design, it means it already has the floor plans of the building. It also has the feasibility study of the building as well. And to ensure that the project is possible, and since it's already a detailed design, it means that the plans as well as the specifications of the project and as well as the estimation of the materials that will be used will be included in this phase. So next we have our detailed architectural and engineering design. So this includes both the engineering and the architectural designs, which will be charged 8% of the construction cost. Detailed design and engineering is an integral phase that defines the sets of overall cost of the project's life cycle. So it plays a vital role in delivering a high quality, cost-effective, and on-time completion of the engineering and construction projects. This also includes that the project holder or the project manager or the planner will be distributing all of the details of the project that the engineers and the architects and the other professionals have provided all throughout. This will also be observed, of course, by the client and as well as the other interest or other people who are paying for that project. Next, you have our construction supervision. So this will be given a 10% of the construction cost. It is the process of ensuring that the project is built in accordance with the requirements of the contract documents, approved plans, specifications, building code standards, and applicable local codes and ordinances. So cities or the local government officials, they all have their own certain local codes depending on the location of the project. So these are still very much with guides to the building codes and the building standards of the Philippines, but some areas need a much more definite codes and ordinances that may be affected by the locations or by the certain what do you call that, like for example that area has a very actually passes through the main fault line of the city, so it can be very much um, it can have a problem when it comes to the earthquake design, especially if it's a high-rise building. So next, here we have the schedule of the minimum basic fees. And of course, minimum basic fees are very much different in every in every services. Architectural engineers, contractors, and workers all have different minimum basic fees. But here are certain principles that must be observed by both the client and as well as the engineer. So first, when doing work on foreign assisted projects or in projects where international consultants participate, the civil engineer performing similar or equivalent work should accept compensation that approximates the international standard rates. So it means if it's an international project or a project that is like a collaboration with an international firm or international company, the engineer, whether they are from the same from the local country or the country itself where the foreigners will be making the project, must accept the compensation that is in reference to the international standard rates, which means the Philippine standards will not be the base or the like the reference of the compensation of the civil engineer, especially if it's a foreign assisted project. Next, we have civil engineers regularly employed in this private sector shall have a minimum compensation corresponding to 10% more than the minimum wage prevailing in the region as a basic monthly salary. Civil engineers employed in the government sector shall have a minimum basic monthly salary corresponding to the appropriate entry positions provided by the Civil Service Commissions. So that's why a lot of firms right now are actually private owned. It is because the minimum compensation for civil engineers corresponds to 10% of the more than the minimum wage of the country. If you are a civil engineer or an engineer in the government sector, of course you are also a public worker, which means that your minimum basic salary must correspond to the appropriate position or the appropriate salary of a public worker or a public engineer. So next, we have a civil engineer employed in the private sector who signs and seals the civil engineering plans, specification, and other related documents of a certain project, and on behalf of his employers, shall be compensated with a minimum of 10% of the professional fee for the project over and above the basic monthly salary. So this explains for itself. The engineer must have a minimum compensation of 10% if they are the one who signs and seals the plans, specifications, and other related documents, which means it's very much it's for a larger scale, and this is only applicable for private sectors. So here we have the minimum compensation for civil engineers as prime professionals. So prime professionals means they could be structural engineers or professionals that are very much experts already in their field and have a lot of experience in construction designing. So all of these groups, we have two groups here, and the project construction costs are divided into four costs, like the basis of those minimum basic fees. So first you have 10 million and less, 10 million pesos and less. We have over 10 million up to 20 million pesos. We have 20 million up to 30 million pesos and over 30 million pesos. As for group 1, here we have simple structures. It could include one-story buildings, warehouse, market buildings, and comparable projects. For the first base, for the 10 million and less projects, the prime engineer or the civil engineer as prime professionals must have at least 6% of the entire project cost. For the 10 million to 20 million, we have 600,000 pesos plus 5.5% of the entire engineering cost. For the 20 million to 30 million project, we have 1,150,000 pesos plus 4.5% of the excess of 20 million pesos. For the 30 million and above, we have 1,600,000 pesos plus 3.5% of the excess of the 30 million project. So for group 2 here, we have buildings of 3 to 14 floors. We have towers, tanks, industrial buildings, piers, and other comparable projects. With the same construction cost, our minimum basic fees respectively would be 7%, 200,000 pesos plus 6.5 of the excess of the 10 million pesos. We have 1,350,000 plus 5.5 of the excess of the 20 million. And then last, you have 1,900,000 plus 4.5 of the excess of 30 million pesos. So next here we have group 3. So these are larger and much more complex projects. It could include buildings of 50 or more floors, like high-rise condominiums or high-rise commercial buildings, long span and complex bridges. We have high dams, port works, and power plants. So respectively of the construction cost, we have 8% of the minimum basic fee. And then next we have 800,000 plus 7.5% of the excess of the 10 million pesos. We have 1,550,000 plus 6.5% of the 20 million. And lastly, we have 2.2 million plus 5.5% of excess of the 30 million project or more. So here we have the minimum compensation for civil engineers as professionals, but not prime. It could mean that they are like entry-level engineers or fresh graduate, or doesn't have enough experience yet to be called prime professionals. So this is the group 4. This could include hotels, large apartment buildings, shopping centers, resorts, hospitals, and comparable projects. So respectively of the construction project cost, our minimum basic fee would only be 1.05%. For the 10 million to 20 million, we have 105,000 plus 0.975% of the excess of the 10 million project. We have 202 and 500,000 plus 0.825% of the excess of the 20 million project. And for over 20 million project cost, we have 285,000 plus a 0.675% of excess of the 30 million project or more. So as you can see, when you compare it, if you are a prime professional or perhaps you are a structural engineer, the minimum basic fees are very much far apart with how it is. Let's go back again. For the group, for this group 3, for buildings of large high-rise buildings, you see that this is at least 8% of the 10 million project for the minimum basic fees. Meanwhile, if you are not a prime professional, you will only receive 1% of the cost of the project, which is quite a huge discrepancy, which is about 7% or less. But this is actually because you are paying for the knowledge and for the professionalism of the engineers that have enough, let's say, experience when it comes to designing. So the longer you are, the more experiences you have in designing a project or anything else in estimation, or for as a civil engineer, your minimum basic fee will increase as well. So next, here we have the minimum compensation for rendering services for civil engineers. For value engineering savings, we require 25% of professional fee. For expert witnesses, it could be on-site and or checking certain places where you require civil engineers. We have 2,000 per appearance. So every time they go to the site or they appear as a witness of the project, they get paid at least 2,000 pesos. For academic services, someone who has a bachelor's degree must have at least 75 to 150 pesos per hour that they offer their services in. It could be for seminars and stuff like that. For master degree holders, we have 150 to 250 pesos per hour. For doctorate degree holders, you have 250 to 400 pesos per hour. If you're a lecturer, let's say Pi CPD, 500 per hour is our minimum or compensation. For conducting tutorial, refresher courses, this could include like if you're invited by a seminar through online, which will conduct refresher or courses or tutorials for engineers or aspiring engineers, you will also be paid 500 per hour. If you are asked to be a co-writer, an author of any article in certain projects or like research papers, it could also include in a magazine. Per article, you are required to be paid 3,000 pesos. So that is all of our report. Thank you so much for listening.